All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, I remember when I was a kid and I first started watching NFL football, there were older quarterbacks still in the NFL. I remember Steve DeBerg. He was known for being the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. He was like 37, 38 years old, still competing at a relatively high level in the league. You also had the great Warren Moon, who was a potent quarterback in the NFL, well into his late 30s, even 40, 41 years old. And now you have Tom Brady, who seems to be resetting or recalibrating what we expect from older quarterbacks. Now, there seems to be a myriad of reasons for that in my view. Number one is very high football IQ. Number two, the system that the New England Patriots run. And number three, the changes in defense. Well, despite all of that, Max Kellerman of the show First Take deduced a few years ago that Tom Brady was going to fall off of the cliff, meaning he was going to totally lose a lot of his quarterback powers. How valid that assertion is going to be established this up-and-coming NFL season. So we're going to find out if Mr. Max Kellerman is right or not. And of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Teflon Tom picking up right where he left off last season, fellas, throwing for 172 yards and 2 TDs last night, looking like Tom Brady. Max, I want to start with you. Brady's 41. You know, we've had a long debate here on the show, well documented, the cliff. Are you backtracking on Brady's cliff now?
I don't expect Max Kellerman to back off of his quote-unquote cliff assertion in regards to Tom Brady, because he tried to create this air about himself, this atmosphere around him that he's someone who states things according to logic, statistics, analytics, etc. So he's going to let Tom Brady first show him that he's not going to be as competitive, as fervent, as potent on the field as he's been in years past. But I do expect Tom Brady to have a Tom Brady season this year. I have to watch him fall off before I believe it. I just can't go by his age, because the addiction that he seems to have to the sport is going to carry him farther than it has carried most other quarterbacks in a far more physical time period in the NFL's history.
Stephen A., what is it you do? No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Oh.
Doesn't look good right now for me, but no, I'm not. Let me give you
And good for you. Stick to your guns until you run out of bullets.
a metaphor here. Analogy, really. Remember the Roadrunner cartoons, guys?
Yeah.
Roadrunner on the
Yeah, of course.
morning cartoon. And the coyote would be tricked into running off the cliff, right? Did he fall right away? No. He thought there was still ground under his feet. He didn't realize there was no ground there. Then eventually he looked down and realized there's no ground there, and then he fell. Remember, he'd hold up the sign and stuff like that? And I think that's where Tom Brady is right now. At this point, I think it is.
Well, speaking of the Roadrunner, I think you need to grab a stick of dynamite.
I think it is mind over matter. He's in a great organization. He looks like he's still got it, but that is the nature of the cliff. These guys, all of them, look like they still got it until they realize, whoa, there's no ground under my feet, and Father Time is undefeated. I don't think Tom Brady will be a great quarterback this season, but I have to admit, Stephen A., the early evidence doesn't look good for my prediction.
Let me say this before Stephen A. Smith jumps in. The reason why I named other prominent older quarterbacks that I remember in the NFL when I first started watching football is because the difference that I see between what's expected of Tom Brady as opposed to what was expected of those quarterbacks is so vastly different. You were expected as a quarterback back in the early 90s to still be able to drive the football down the field. I don't think that Brady's going to be asked to drive the football down the field that much. That is why when people make so much of the lack of downfield threat on the Patriots wide receiver core, I think that that's purposeful. I think that Belichick purposefully avoids speedsters on the Patriots so that he's not forced to answer questions as to why they're not forcing the football down the field, trying to stretch the field. Because he's trying to hide Tom Brady's limitations in regard to his ability to be accurate throwing the football down the field. Because that's the first thing to go in quarterbacks, is the ability to throw accurate deep balls. A lot of them can still throw very accurate seam routes or even sideline patterns. And every once in a while, if they have a wide open target down the field, they'll throw it down the field. But in regards to having the ability to drop the ball into the bucket, in double coverage or even great single coverage, that's the first thing that they lose. And I have noticed that Brady's downfield accuracy has fell off a little bit. So I think that there's a method to Belichick's madness in regards to having a lot of those little miniature 5'8", 5'9" Caucasian wide receivers, because it takes away a lot of the onus that might be otherwise placed on Brady to show what he could do down the field. Because back in the 90s, Warren Moon was expected to be able to throw the football down the field. So was Steve DeBerg. Tom Brady is not. He's allowed to just dink and dunk and little draw passes and screen passes and little dump offs and little 15-yard seam routes to Gronk, so on and so forth.
Hey, can I ask him something I've asked you before? Max, do you ever admit you're wrong?
Well, in Max's mind, he's never wrong, so why would he have to admit to something that he's never experienced?
If I'm wrong this season, I'll admit it. It's the preseason.
I was just wondering, like, even at home, if you will admit when you're wrong.
Oh, please. Max is the type of guy who always admits that he's wrong in front of his wife. That guy has pussy whip written all over him.
I think I do admit when I'm wrong. I've admitted it on this show. Like, there's been...
That motherfucker be like, honey, I'm sorry for lifting up the toilet seat while I was peeing. I'll sit down to pee like you told me.
Been like 2 or 3 times,
Just
and then
checking,
the other
just checking.
1,000-something times I've been right.
Just checking. Stephen A.
Well, it's hard to be wrong when you take multiple sides, so I guess that's his defense. But I will say this about your argument, and I won't even debate it, Max Kellerman. I'll just ask a question, and I'll just let Darren get on you a little bit, because I'm curious. So, almost 2 years ago, you said Tom Brady was going to fall off a cliff. After you make those statements, he completes 67% of his passes. Okay, throws for nearly 4,000 yards, has 28 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. But the cliff is coming. And then last year, he completes 66% of his passes, throws 32 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, and wins his 3rd MVP of his career. And you're sitting here now saying it doesn't look good, but you haven't changed your position. Is that correct?
I'll say this for Max Kellerman's attempt at a point. He does have the Brett Favre situation as a pretext or as precedent for what he's saying about Tom Brady. There have been cases for quarterbacks in that age range of 39, 40 years old who had great seasons and then fell off the cliff the next year.
Correct.
Okay. So in other words, you're not willing to acknowledge and admit the obvious, which is that you're already wrong. You're already
not wrong
wrong.
until the season starts. Not wrong until the season starts.
How?
Because none of this stuff counts. When the season starts, if he's still a great quarterback, I'll be wrong.
Okay. So which part?
Kellerman can't even keep a straight face.
Which part of the season? Just for clarification, is it after game 1? Is it after game 4 in September?
If he is great in game... If he's great in game 1, I'll have been proven wrong. He will have broken the record for longevity. But let me say, you fundamentally misunderstand the cliff. Darren, real quick, if I may.
Okay.
If I may.
Go ahead.
The idea that people have wrong about football quarterbacks throughout history, maybe now until Tom Brady, will see, is that they see the older quarterbacks, the great ones, Favre, Peyton Manning, whoever it is, cruising along at such high altitude that the natural assumption is even in decline, they have years of excellence ahead of them. The reason I called it a cliff is because, in fact, that's not what happens. They cruise along at incredibly high altitude, and then all of a sudden, one day, they're just not good anymore. It happens suddenly, not like in other sports where there's gradual decline. That's why there's a cliff. That's why I call it a cliff.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get this right. So has he fallen off the cliff, or is it just like a parachute came out and it's just like a slow fall? What?
He's saying that Tom Brady is approaching the edge of the cliff. That's what he's saying, Darren Woodson.
I'm trying to figure that out. Which one was it, Max? Is it a slow fall?
The drop dead deadline for my prediction is week 1 this season, but it's not the preseason.
Oh, it's not the preseason.
Can we do like a cliff burial on the show after week 1? Can we hold a ceremony and just and bury the hot take?
Freezing cold takes.
Has Max ever apologized?
Molly, he's willing to admit that he's wrong, But in the same breath, he's quick to say that while he's looking wrong right now, why it's already proven he's wrong because Brady is over 30 and the last 2 seasons he's performed the way that he did. This is about the 3rd time Max has told us. Before it was me, then it was me and Will Kane, then it was me, you and Will Kane, Molly, and now it's Darren Woodson added to the mix where we all have it wrong. Max Kellerman has explained his argument very cogently. He's very clear. But the rest of us have a fundamental lack of understanding
We didn't go to
and
Columbia.
comprehending as to the defense, as to the definition of the cliff. This is what it is. Even though Tom Brady's the reigning league MVP, even though Tom Brady just lost the Super Bowl where he passed for 500 yards, even though his birth certificate says he's passed 40 a while ago, which is when Max said he was going to fall off the cliff, we have a fundamental lack of understanding. Don't y'all understand it, Molly and Darren?
Well, look, I'll say this about Max Kellerman's argument. As he stated, until we watch Tom Brady for this entire NFL season, and he's still the player that he's been for the last 15 years or so, Max Kellerman's assertion is still open. It still has yet to be established whether or not he's correct. Now, do I believe that Tom Brady's going to fall off this up-and-coming NFL season? I would say no. But not because I necessarily believe that he's still the quarterback that he was 10 or 11 years ago. I just think that the game has changed so much and it's just become so much easier for quarterbacks that have a high level of knowledge of the game, like a Tom Brady, someone who's seen it all, that he can kind of fake it per se. Tom Brady knows how to finish a season completing 65% of his passes. He could do that in his sleep. He knows how to march his team down the field in 11 or 12 plays, dinking and dunking, because he's seen every defense. The time when defenses could bump receivers and force you to throw the football over their heads, that time is gone because the corners can barely touch the receivers anymore. So it's harder to evaluate how much a player has fallen off in their late 30s, even into their early 40s, than it would have been 20 years ago.
Don't you get it?
Let me
We
can't
can't comprehend.
Yeah.
We
I
don't
get it.
comprehend
It's
what
like
Max
when
is
you
saying.
break
We
up
don't have a
with
clue.
somebody.
Or not.
We're lost. We can't comprehend what Max is saying. Don't y'all get it?
Yeah.
Of course we don't. Of course we don't know.
Let me
Of course
explain
we
how
don't know.
deep it goes. This
Okay.
is how deep it goes. If and when Tom Brady is great in week 1 and disproves finally my drop dead deadline, which I established, when you asked me to clarify what I meant by the cliff, probably our second show together 2 years plus ago. If he does that, you know who's the only person who's allowed to be impressed by Tom Brady is me. Because everyone else who doubted it, everyone else who simply assumed he would do what's never been done before, well, you just assumed he'd do this incredible thing. I was
That's not a bad point.
the one who, based on history, said no one has
I
ever
help y'all
done
out.
that.
Okay,
I
okay,
alone. I'm allowed to celebrate. That's right.
What are we in a courtroom?
Darren and Molly,
Don't try to flip it.
Darren and Molly, don't argue with this man over this issue. It is simple. I'm going to tell you here what Max cannot deny. You are the worst teacher in America. Because no one understands what the hell you're talking about. You said the cliff. The cliff is been it. They don't.
I have no problem understanding what Max Kellerman is talking about. I just think that he's going to be wrong. I think that he has neglected to factor in certain elements that would affect his argument had he considered them. It's difficult to use precedent in regards to when a certain player is going to fall off when there were different conditions back in the 80s and 90s. The conditions have changed so much that you have to change your argument.
They don't comprehend a damn thing
I got
you're
a
saying
question. I do
on
have a
this
question.
issue.
I do have a
When it
question.
comes to the cliff, you are the worst
Yeah.
teacher in the history of American sports.
Either that or you're the worst listener in the history of American sports, Stephen A. Smith. Because I think that Max Kellerman has explained his premise relatively well. It's just that it's not going to come to fruition.
All right.
That's the bottom
I'm
line.
working against
No one cares.
Darren, I'm working
Wait, wait,
against someone who's giving it. Remember when I said disinformation? Like the Russians give out disinformation?
Disinformation.
This is Stephen A's
Oh, my God.
strategy.
Hey,
It's
Max,
disinformation.
Didn't he say that about
After
Will?
week 1, you
Molly,
have to
didn't
be
he say that about
he's
Will
not
and you?
the only one giving
Didn't he say that about Will and you, Molly?
No, hey, Max, I
Right
have a
there.
question for you. Max, do the Patriots win the AFC East this year? You got a
Yes.
question. They do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
When
so.
okay, do you think
But that's
Patriots-
because the AFC East
Okay,
is
no. Do the Patriots make it to the playoffs this year?
Well, Darren Woodson, quite frankly, that's not a very good question. You just asked Max Kellerman if the Patriots were going to win the AFC East division. He said yes. So clearly, they're going to make the playoffs. You play in the NFL for what, 12, 13 seasons, and you didn't know that?
Yep.
Okay. Do the Patriots have a legit chance of winning the AFC Championship?
Do they have a legit chance at this moment? You'd have to say yes.
Absolutely. But he's going to fall off the... So this year, you're saying
They have
basically...
the greatest coach
After
of all
game
time.
one.
Basically, after game one,
They have
you're
the
saying he
greatest
is
coaching
not
staff of
going
all
to
Just
fall off the
remember,
cliff.
it's not going to be gradual.
Woodson's line of questioning got better as he moved along. Basically, as he's saying, it's very obvious. For the Patriots to be in the position to possibly win another Super Bowl, you can't just give the credit to Belichick. It has to go to Brady because they don't have enough team talent for Bill Belichick to be able to elevate the team. So Max Kellerman has basically checkmated himself.
It's like,
There's a parachute.
yeah.
Oh, boy,
No,
there's
wait,
a
wait,
parachute.
She said it's like
Wait,
this.
It's a slow
I
fall.
want to answer that. Hold on, I want to answer that. Molly, I want to answer
Okay.
that. Had Peyton Manning fallen off the cliff when they won in Denver?
That's a pretty good retort.
That's a good one. Yes. Yeah, he had fallen off.
Yeah, he'd fallen
Yeah,
off
yeah.
the cliff,
Great
but he was
defense.
smart
Great
enough and in a
defense.
good enough situation
And
with a good enough defense to win. And I'm saying,
Four
even if it's the
surgeries.
offense, and Brady is a part of the offense, it is a great
But
enough
there's-
organization,
okay, wait a
great
minute.
enough coaching.
No, sir. That was a good retort. That was a good attempt to save yourself. But the Patriots don't have anywhere near the personnel that the Broncos had on defense that year. I mean, give me a break. It's not even close. The Broncos had one of the great defenses of the last 10 years that year that they won the championship. The Patriots defense is probably going to finish in the bottom 5% of the NFL this year.
You can't compare this
and good
Patriots.
enough parts around
You
him.
cannot compare this Patriots defense against that Broncos defense.
Ding.
Not the defense,
personnel.
but
I'm
the
just-
offense. Yes.
Just for the record, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Brady.
Even the offensive personnel is no comparison. The Patriots have Gronk, but that's about it.
Turned 41 on August
Yeah.
3rd.
Gronk and, of course, Tom Brady.
Yep.
Enough said. We don't have to listen to this professor.
I love you,
we don't have to listen to
41.
Professor Max,
I
who
love
don't know
you.
how to teach students.
Listen.
This is
When he
the
wins the
classic
game,
professor
Max,
that's talking
great,
to
I'll be
himself.
wrong.
Way to stand by the courage of your convictions. You
Max
should
is
be
a
a
boxer.
lawyer.
Max
No,
is a
he
boxer.
should be a
He's a
lawyer.
boxer.
Molly, where did you go to school?
Politician.
Hold on, Molly, where did you go to school? You went to UConn,
I went
right?
to UConn.
You went to UConn, right? We didn't even bring up me, historically black institution. You don't want to do that? Fine. Molly went to UConn. Will Kane, you're a lawyer by profession. Me, Darren being Darren. None of us comprehend. Max knows, and we
Yeah.
don't.
bring some
All we
puppets
know is
next
that
time.
Tom Brady's winning MVP.
Max Kellerman says he's going to bring sock puppets next time. Stephen A. is making himself sound real stupid by trying to include everyone in his own confusion. What it really is that Stephen A. Smith is frustrated with anyone that has a vaster vocabulary than he does.
That's all we know.
That Ivy
So we
League,
know.
that Ivy League education, next level. All right, we got to leave it there, guys. That was fun.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. It's going to be very interesting to see how good Tom Brady is this season. I think that he's going to be able to transcend whatever he may have lost with age just through knowledge. And that's very common with elite level athletes. So peace.